In this video, we're going to take an in-depth look at canonical tags for product pages on Adobe Business Catalyst. This is Mike Salander with BC Academy. So what is a canonical tag and why are we even creating this tutorial? Well, you'll find that Business Catalyst has a great way of handling this SEO topic called canonicals. And there's a couple things that we're going to want to know about what it can and can't do. And if for whatever reason you need to modify something, how to potentially go about doing it. All right. So backing up, what a canonical tag is all about is it's a simple way to tell search engines the preferred version of a page. So you can think of it as like a 301 redirect. You've probably all familiar with 301 redirects. It's usually what happens when you migrate one site over to a new site and they have different URLs, and you're saying to Google and search engines that the page that used to have this URL, it's now located over here. It's similar with canonicals. What we're saying is when we get to a particular page that we're linking, or we're putting a little tag that tells the search engines, okay, this other page is actually the preferred version of this page. And there's a few different reasons why you may do this, but in particular, the main reason is for duplicate content, to make sure that we're not trying to get multiple pages that are very similar or the same in content to rank. And we want Google to, all of the duplicate ones, to point to one main one so it could just listen and index that page instead. So like I said, Moz kind of brings up that the canonical tag passes about the same amount of link juice as a 301 redirect. But it's important to remember that a URL redirected or via canonical isn't as strong as a link to the destination itself. So there is a little bit of dilution that happens every time that we redirect something. So why do we even need to worry about canonicals with BC products? You might be thinking, I'm not entering in multiple products into the database. I've just got one product for it. Well, in Business Catalyst, there's two things that happen that we need to be aware of. One is that products in multiple catalogs have multiple URLs associated with it. Now let me show you what I mean. For this particular product, Dick's Perky Pickles, we are underneath horseradish products, and we can see the URL up here as so. But if we go to the back end, we can see that there's actually multiple URLs associated with this particular product. And so this means I can put any of these URLs into the browser and it's going to pull up the identical page. So this is about 6 different URLs here that all have the same thing. And so with Business Catalyst, we get to choose what is actually the URL that we want to be the canonical. So all other URLs will point to this URL. The second thing is that all BC sites have at least 3 domains associated with it. You know, whatever your main domain is, then your website at businesscatalyst.com, then your website at worldsecuresystems.com. So all 3 of these will have the exact same pages, exact same content on it. Now we want to make sure that we're going to be really good about linking to content on the correct domain. And really, you shouldn't link to anything on the businesscatalyst.com domain. Only reason to use World Secure Systems is anytime you need HTTPS and you need to securely transmit data in terms of like secure zones and payments, for instance, everything else should really be on the main domain. So when we're thinking about products, really what we want is we want the canonical URL to make sure it's always on the main domain. So let's look at what happens with products on Business Catalyst when you're on the worldsecuresystems.com domain. So hopefully you're never on a page on your website in the World Secure Systems that always should be redirected back to your main domain. But if that in fact happens, unfortunately the canonical in Business Catalyst will take you to the worldsecuresystems.com rather than the actual main domain. So canonicals are used to cross-reference content on multiple domains, and this would be a very appropriate use for it. So this might be one of the reasons if you've got worldsecuresystems.com accidentally these pages accidentally index on Google, where you're probably thinking, hey, well, let me go and update this canonical tag so that it actually points to the right place. The problem is, to my knowledge, is not something that we're going to be able to overcome. And I'll explain that in a little bit after you see kind of how canonical tags are working in Business Catalyst. Okay, so like we already talked about, doesn't Business Catalyst already put these canonicals on the page by default? So why are we even talking about this? Well, the answer is yes, it does, but it doesn't solve the domain issue. And like I just pointed out, we can't solve this with canonicals, but what we can do is make sure that we're not linking to product pages on different domains. This is by far the most important thing. And then the other thing is, well, sometimes you'd rather link directly to the right page because a direct link is more valuable than a redirected link. And the reason that happens, or why we even want the direct link, is because based off of the catalog that the product is in, and based on how the user navigates that catalog structure, the URL in the page is going to be different. So if you really wanted those links to the product pages all to be to the same URL, instead of a URL that has a canonical to it, then you might want the actual tag for it. Now, I don't think that these are big issues. These are really small issues, and they shouldn't affect they really shouldn't affect your SEO very, very much. Why I bring this up is because for people who may have Business Catalyst sites for a long time, they may notice issues where duplicate canonicals are showing up because they might have found another method to manually put in canonicals into the descriptions of product, for instance, and then now Business Catalyst has updated a while back to automatically include canonicals. They might see 2 on there. Or maybe you're thinking, okay, Mike, I know that these aren't really that big of issues, but I'm really an SEO like guru, and I just want to make sure it's 100% like the best thing that could possibly be. And so you might go down this path of trying to get the canonicals to override the canonicals that Business Catalyst puts in place. And so hopefully this video will help you understand and save you maybe some headaches and mistakes from going down that route. All right, so let's quickly review what a canonical link is and what Business Catalyst does by default. So by default, Business Catalyst will place a link, this canonical link that looks something like this, onto the all product pages that aren't the destination page. So that means all other pages that aren't the canonical URL. So if this is mysite.com/shop/destination-link and there is /shop/destination-link 1234, then the pages destination-link 1234 would all have this canonical link, but not the actual destination link page itself, which is fine. A self-referencing canonical is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And in the case of solving the cross-domain, we'd actually prefer it if it had the main domain associated with it. Since it doesn't, it's completely fine, and we're good with it not being on the main product page or the destination page. And what happens is if you don't pick a canonical URL, Business Catalyst will default to the first product URL and make it the canonical URL. So how do we go about changing the canonical URL in Business Catalyst? Well, there's 2 different options. One is we can go to the product details panel, expand the SEO metadata, and then use the canonical URL dropdown. And I already showed you this, but let me show it to you again. So if I go to the back end and go down to SEO metadata and product canonical URL, I can see a drop down here, and I can choose, and I can say, you know what, pickles and olives makes more sense for this. That's the main one that I want to index, or that I want them all to point to. The second is you can change a canonical URL in the bulk using an export file. If I go over to the back end and click on products, I can see a list of all my products, and then I can export this into Excel. When I open up the file, we'll see that we have product URL, and this is going to be where I can put what I want the default URL or the canonical URL to be for this particular product. So for most people, this is really all you need to know about canonicals and products in Business Catalyst. But for the advanced users, or for people who just love knowing everything there is to know about it, continue on, because we're gonna talk about how you can get the canonical URL of a product if you want to or need to. All right. So let's pretend we know how to get the canonical URL, and you will find out momentarily. But let's ask ourselves, is there really a point? Is there a point in grabbing the canonical URL? The answer is not on the product detail page. And the reason is, if you add your own canonical URL, BC will still output theirs. The only exception is an exception that we don't care about, and that is if the canonical URL is the same as theirs. And so I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by this. So if you're trying to think about overriding it, putting your own, and and fixing the cross domain linking, then you're going to run into this roadblock. So next, let's learn how to get the canonical URL so that we can put that test into play and see what happens. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to use a module data, which is a great way of consuming all the information we need from Business Catalyst and anywhere we need it, essentially. So we're going to say the resource we want to get is products, and the field that I want is a canonical URL, and the resource ID is going to be globals.get.product.id. So this is a way in Liquid that I can get the product ID from the page that I'm currently on. Of course, I have to be on a product page. And the skip and the limit don't matter, and the order doesn't matter because I'm just grabbing one item. And then I'm storing this into a collection or a variable called my product. And then in order to get the product or the canonical URL, I'm going to use my product.canonical URL. So that's how to call that actual information. But there's something you really need to be careful with. So you might use this approach to get the absolute right URL. So let's say share on social media, right? So it's much better, even if you're on the wrong page, instead of the sharing widget to say, grab the canonical URL, grab the URL, the main URL. Let's have it grab the actual right URL. Or maybe we're in the list view in catalogs, and instead of linking directly to or linking to the extra URL, you want to update that and have it go right to the canonical URL. But the thing to be careful with about this approach is that module data can use up more resources, take more time in order to get this. So it's not as quick as actually grabbing a tag directly from the product layouts, which there's a bunch of them available to you, but canonical URL is not one of them. So if you use this in, let's say, a list view and you've got hundreds of products, you don't want to do hundreds of different module data lookups. Your page is going to take longer to load. So in that case, what you're going to want to do is something like grab all of the products. Don't filter out by a particular product ID. Grab it into a collection and then search and find the item in the collection for each of the products on the page that you need access to. So it's a little bit more advanced. It takes a little bit longer to code up front, but saves you in performance. So let's head over to the website and look at what happens by default. So I have two different ways to get this page. One underneath the horseradish products, and then the other one underneath specialty sauces. And you can see these domains are different. If I go to the view source of the first one, the horseradish, there is no canonical on the page here because it is the actual canonical URL. If I go over to the specialty sauces, we can see that a canonical here is placed for the horseradish link. So this is the default behavior. And the default behavior seems like it works. But what happens if I get to a World Secure Systems page of that default horseradish product? If I view source here, there is no canonical. And in this case, I actually want the canonical back to the main domain. So the default isn't going to help us in that particular case. So that's where we might invent the idea of, hey, what if I can get the canonical URL and output it on the page? Will that work? Now let's look at the implementation. I went over to Layouts, Online Shop, and then Large Product, and I got to this view. at the top, I placed in these 2 lines of code. And this is very similar to what I had in the PowerPoint. The difference is I just used the tag since we're within the layout ID. And the second is I put module default URL in front here. The problem is I can't use that here because the website is not live and there isn't a default URL. So in this case, I am going to need to grab the Business Catalyst version and place that in front. And let's see what happens. We're going to get rid of the slash. We're going to hit save. And now let's go back to our main horseradish page, the Canonical URL, and hit refresh. And what happens? Okay, so we have a self-referencing page. That's fine. So that outputs, and it's the correct one, the horseradish perky pickles. Now if we go back and refresh this one, we can see that it only outputs one. It's the correct one because remember the canonical URL that we're outputting is the same as what Business Catalyst, so it doesn't put 2 different ones. It just puts one reference of it. So all of this is all well and good so far. Now you're probably wondering, well, how does it handle on the worldsecuresystems.com domain if we're on the canonical URL? So if we go here and refresh, we can see that we have a canonical, and on the World Secure System, it points back to our Business Catalyst. This is fantastic. This is what we wanted. But what happens if we go to one of our extra pages, our non-canonical pages on the World Secure Systems, and we refresh? We can see canonical here to the World Secure Systems, and then a canonical here to the Business Catalyst. So we've got 2 different canonicals. So this is not desirable. We don't want to have both on the page. So if you go and try to implement this, and if you test it across all of them, you may again get excited part of the way there until you hit this use case. So really the best way to approach this, instead of trying to override the default canonicals in Business Catalyst, is write some JavaScript to take the World Secure, anytime that someone's on a World Secure Systems, to redirect them to the main domain, or even better yet, make sure that these product pages are never linked on the worldsecuresystems.com domain. But I think if you've got both of those protections in place, you're not linking to it, and in case if anyone gets to it, it automatically kicks you over to the main domains version of it, then I think you're going to be in good shape, and you're not going to need to worry about the needing to put canonicals for the cross domains on Business Catalyst. And as we already have seen, Business Catalyst does a great job of putting those canonical URLs in when you're on the main domain, and it puts it on all the products that are not the canonical URL. So there you have it. You now know more about canonical tags on product pages for Business Catalyst than you've ever wanted to know. I hope you found this information useful. This has been Mike Salander with the BC Academy. Thanks so much for watching.